day 17 of A Year to Live. So, yeah, I think 17. It's one of my favorite numbers. It's one of those you can't lose with the 17 kind of thing. It reduces down to 8 for those of you who are into numerology, which I've played with. I've always liked numbers. I loved accounting and calculator class in college. I could go really fast, adding things up on a old clunky calculator with tape. Yeah. Oh, I don't have my glasses nearby. I can't see who's on here. I'll just wave anyways. Just listening to some music by Gabriel Roth and the Mirrors. It's an album called Bones, if you can hear that. What I like about it is the drum beat. And I was reflecting further on the subject of anger and the intensity of that edge that we find ourselves on, especially as parents, right? Man, there's nothing like a couple of ever-present thought interrupters to push you to your limits, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, every level. Motherhood, Swami Radha used to say, and I consider her one of my first teachers. She was the founder of Yashodhara Ashram in BC, and that was kind of the place where I like to say I fell down the rabbit hole. I fell really deep down the rabbit hole of yoga at Yashodhara Ashram in 1999. That's a story for another day. I'm not going to tell that story today. But that was after, like, I didn't have the tool of yoga so much when my kids were little. I didn't have the practice of asana, although I was very curious about life and the mystery and exploring my own true nature and figuring out who I was. Like I think I've mentioned in my 30s, who I was outside my family of origin, who I was outside normal, the way normal people did it, you know, like there was a part of me that felt like I wanted that white picket fence and everything perfect, but I wasn't experiencing that. So, you know, it's like, what was that part of me that wanted that, or that thought that was a reality, or that thought that was actually even what I wanted, when it didn't seem to fit me? It was like a coat that didn't fit. You know, I was never a bake cookies and kind of mom. I didn't feel normal ever. I made choices in my awake years that didn't win any popularity contests. And one of them was, and this is going back to motherhood, and when my children were little, and they were 5 years apart, so I kind of experienced the intensity a little bit differently than folks who may have had two little kids fairly close together. I can't really speak to that experience, only that I know number 2 was a game changer for me. 1 was easy compared to 2. 2 was like 10. And but I thought it was intense with 1. Maybe you had that misconception until you had 2 as well. But still, I needed to find tools to deal with the intensity, and that I saw the feedback today, but I've had a high fever and a screaming mad headache most of the day. And so it was actually when I was surfing the waves of pain, because they don't really want me to take Tylenol when I'm kicking a bit of a fever, because it can get me into trouble. It can mask my true symptoms. So I was just resting and riding the waves of pain. And maybe you did this in your labor if you're a mom too, and if you're not a mom, then I'm sure you've been in a painful, as I like to say, asana in your life at some point in time. And maybe it was on your yoga mat, where you had to use your mind to surf the waves of intensity, or stay in the intensity without blowing a gasket, And motherhood definitely pushes you to those blow a gasket kind of moments. And, none of us really want to, like my girls were saying last night, break a phone. Not my finest moment, going, I don't necessarily recommend that. But, in that moment, I couldn't stop it. And so we have to forgive ourselves for these moments, of which there are many. Oh, but the intensity. So it reminded me of like the fine line between anything, between right and wrong, the space between right and wrong, the fine line between pain and ecstasy. And that is the line that I'm going to talk about, the line between pain and ecstasy, because that's an important place for us as all humans, but as yoginis, as dakinis, as shapeshifters, as witches, however you want to see yourself, as a woman in these times and these are intense times, let's face it. And if you're a single mom, like, oh my goodness, will you have intense moments? Absolutely. It's intense enough if you have a partner that is around. But if you are on your own with children for a good chunk of your day, they're like little mirrors, 24/7, 365. They're an intense asana. Motherhood is an intense asana. And Swami Radha, going back to her, but I didn't find her until 1999. So I was, not a long time, but it felt like a long time, 7 years into the mothering journey. She would say that motherhood is good practice for the spiritual life. And I'm like, practice for it? That felt weird. Means that, it's a practice in surrender. And also, I think, so like surrendering to the moment, so surrendering to the intensity, because it's only when we wish it was different that we start to suffer. It's like, so we're dancing on that edge between that human edge between egotism and pride, and like dancing on the edge. And what are we gonna do there? We have to feel it. We have to feel that intensity and channel that energy, because the energy is really intense there, and that's what you really want to notice. You don't want to let it whirl around in your mind. A, try and figure it out, or B, and this is a tendency that I think we have, trying to blame it on something, because that's another aspect of like mindset or worldview that I think causes a lot of suffering, where that rage becomes perhaps too intense or is because we fuel it with a little bit of blame, or wishing it was different than it is. It always is what it is. And when we can own that, when we can own what is, like, oh, I'm in an intense moment here, and it's all on me. Like, there's no one else around here. any thoughts that are fueling this intensity, they're mine. They're in my head. There's nobody else here. It's not anybody else's fault ever that I'm feeling this way. No one has that power over me. I take 100% responsibility. And 100%, this is the thing about 100%. 100% is 100%. It's not 99%. It's not 95%. And leaders like to live their lives in the top 3%, not of the world, the top 3% of our own potential. So one thing I think I did really well, which was not necessarily supported, or like no one said, oh, you know, good for you, you know, is take time for myself and find the resources, the support that I needed to just get a little space, because that intensity needs to be explored in a little bit of space. However, we always think, like, I remember thinking, oh, if I only had a week off, you know. But what I found was that an hour here or there was enough to take me off the edge and give me a little bit of space to either journal or, and this is one of my favorite practices, or was one of my favorite practices, especially when my kids were little, was dancing. And not in the fun kind of shoebop way that you might see me do or promote a little bit on these calls, but kind of I don't know if the term's right, but it's kind of like trance dancing, and it was something that I could do at home, you know, either when the kids were out for half an hour or something, or I could shut a door. I could find a little bit of space in our 800 square feet, and put on some music and move, like do movements that aren't dance movements to shift the energy, the intensity that I was feeling inside of my skin. You know, I wanted to get out of my skin. It was so intense. So I got more into it, and it was through dance, and it was through Gabriel Roth and the five rhythms, I think it's called. It was my dance practice was I didn't dance quite so much after I found the tool of asana, but it was a major one for a good chunk of my years. And I would just let my body lead the way. And some of Osho's moving meditations are really good, that I found later on that I really liked. There's one called No Dimensions that I particularly liked, because they get you out of your head where all the blame and the you know, habitual pattern thinking of trying to figure out what's happening, what to do. I tried not to spend a lot of time up there fueling the intensity of my life and whatever angst I was feeling. I would give them a little bit of space and move with them and let them speak to me, kind of. But that required space. So you got to take that space. And I know how hard it is to do that when you have either a working partner, or like if you're alone with little ones, if you're a single mom, if your mental health, your emotional health, if no one else values it and supports it, you must. I mean, it doesn't matter. And you have to do what it takes to get that support and find that space so that you can explore that razor's edge that you're walking in a constructive way without causing harm to the little people around you. And it's hard to know that despite our best efforts, we do, you know. Like I used to say to my kids, we had a conversation about this not too long ago. which is why it was funny, why it came up yesterday. It was that, even though I would explain to them that my anger, my frustration, whatever, negative emotion that intensity that I was dealing with had nothing to do with them. But that, and this is what they said, it didn't change the fact that it scared them. Like, it's just like, holy crap, mom's having a moment. And she says it has nothing to do with us, but I don't really like that too much, But hey, I was in the situation I was. I didn't have a lot of family support around me to drop the kids off to and get some space. So they were with me a lot, and we homeschooled our children as well. So our children, they're not my children. They came through me, but as Khalil Gibran would say, they come through you, but they are not from you. And though they are with you, they belong not to you. My children are not my children. They are the sons and the daughters of life longing for itself. I used to sing too. I used to sing that specific song as loud and as proudly as I could when I came up against the angst in my own mind about what other people thought I should be doing to raise my children. Because I didn't do normal things, I didn't feed them normally, I didn't school them normally, and I was open to, I took breaks from them. I went away and I cared for myself. These things were not applauded back when I was mothering in those early years. And people didn't know what to do with it. So they would give me advice, on what I should be doing with my children, which is what we do. I'm sure I've given, obviously, if I'm getting that kind of advice, I've given that kind of advice. And that's the humbling part. And that's the other part too, that I wanted to speak about, with the mindset and the viewpoint and the perspective that you must hold when you're in an intense situation in your life, because they're great teachers, and you want to surrender to it and work with it, not wrestle, not try and make it something other than it is through blame or regret, or trying to figure it out, or asking the question, why is this happening to me? That's a victim mentality that says someone else, and this is not this could spark some debate, but from my viewpoint, when I owned my own victim mentality that said, if only I had had different parents, different siblings, different bosses, a different husband, then my life, if only I had this, that, or something else, then my life would be different, and I wouldn't be so whatever I was. And it's like, no, those are all, they're all excuses. And until I owned my situation 100%, I suffered. I really did, mentally and emotionally. So owning your situation, however intense it is, and actually choosing it. Like, I choose this. And I've seen that, like a popular quote out there these days that says, act as if what is happening in your life right now, you chose it. And there's a little bit of I don't know. Let's just say the vibe of it is a little bit off, like so much spouted wisdom today. Innocently enough, but without the foundation of deep understanding and experience to be able to say that and really mean it. I think it comes across kind of trite sometimes, but it's like, we've got to always focus on, okay, what is in this for me? How can I use this energy? How can I use this situation to catapult myself to a new level of understanding and being, and embrace it, right? Instead of wishing it was different or thinking that we can completely annihilate it in some way. It's there. You don't want to keep it happening by thinking about it in a way that is not productive for your future. And you want to do something with that energy that is creative. So, writing, painting, dancing, moving, building, channeling that angst in some creative way, make something that's representative of it, and smash that if you have to smash something. Throw it in the river. The things I have stood on the bridge with, wanting to just throw it in the river and be done with it, but we're never done. It's like we're not done till we're dead, and then even then, it's like we might take some of these things with us for our next life if we're lucky enough to attain another human birth, which is like winning like the big Maha lottery. It's like, act as if you chose it. Own it in that way. It's like, I choose this. I welcome it. And I love the challenge of it. And I'm going to work with this energy, and I'm going to prioritize it, especially if you get a big curveball, good or bad, good or hard, I should say. Create a lot of space around it, because like all big moments, life, birth, death of a parent or a loved one, those situations don't come regularly, but that intensity that is at the surface for you to work with and mold, like the artist of your life that you are. It's like, what do you want to say with that? With that art, with that energy, what do you want to create with that? And I never really explored those kinds of things through my art. I didn't, which was photographic, although I had a desire to do that, but not a lot of, excuses probably around that. I surrendered to motherhood. I really did, in every aspect of my being, and I still am. It's a big role for me in this lifetime. And is what motivates me to transform those intense moments. So moving my body, and just like, I especially needed to move my head and shake my head, and I was remembering like my hair moving when I would dance, and wishing I could get like a photograph of it or something in some moments to see, like, just, and feeling the tension in my body where I couldn't move freely. So that particular track by Gabriel Roth and the Mirrors is called Snake. And I love the drum beat in it. And it reminded me of all the times that I was in situations where I was dancing and moving energy, trying to shift the intensity within me. And it was always a drum beat that I would really, like my eyes closed, feeling the pulsation in my body long before I really understood, all the kind of yogic principles around that, and moving and shaking, and like heat and water, right? Sweat your prayers is Gabriel Roth's book. And that was my practice, is like just finding that beat and moving my body, noticing where it wasn't moving naturally, and I was trying to control the movement like a good dancer. Like, get wild with it. And you could do that when your kids are there. Music is always a great way to just shift a moment, and they'll love it too. But I was very serious back then too, and I would wake up early in the morning and write. That was my first practice. I remember coming home, and I had this memory today, coming home, as a teenager, my mom flicking the light on and off as I sat in the driveway, a little past my curfew. It's just like, I'm right here. Don't flick the light at me. I would be so upset that I'd come in and I'd grab some loose leaf paper and a pen, and I would write them a letter. And then I can remember taking that letter. So intense, right? My energy was so intense around it, I couldn't sleep. They could finally sleep because I was home, but I couldn't sleep. So I'd sit there and write this 7-page letter, fold it up, and then shove it under their bedroom door and go, there. That's what you're going to wake up to. You might be sleeping right now, but you were going to get a piece of my mind. First thing in the morning. Oh, God. When my mom died, I spent a week in her home after she passed. And I hope to find things, She had gotten rid of all the letters I wrote. I wondered if she would have kept them. I wrote her some pretty epic letters all the way along. And it's a very poignant one when I became a mom for the first time and understood at a deeper level what she was going through with all of us kids. Oh my goodness. And I thought she'd keep them, My kids, I wonder what they'll find in all my journals. Like when I sit here, I see them. All my journals that have little thoughts in them. I'm trying to compile them a little bit, but when I've had a day like today with a fever and a splitting headache, I can just think about these things. So I'm grateful to have someone to talk to about them. So thank you. But also, it was kind of like a continuation, and I was grateful for the time to reflect on anger and how really that victim mentality, that mindset of the suffering was horrendous until I owned and surrendered to what was going on. That was a great way to shift, because I think true rage is fairly a rare emotion, and underneath that, like I said, is the emotion of sadness. It's a higher vibration, true sadness, not poor me sadness, but yeah. I don't know. I hope that helps if you're dealing with some intensity. But I think it's my practice of parenting and mothering for all those years and working through deep challenge on all levels of my physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, like dancing on the edge, living on the edge, dancing on the razor's edge, finding the fine lines between pain and ecstasy. It's a juicy practice. Feel it, Feel it. Transform it with your own sweat, your own blood, sweat, and tears. Of course, I'm not saying, stay and put up with an abusively intense situation. I know all too well what that's like too. And it was hard to leave because I wasn't empowered at that time. That's a story for another night. For tonight, I'll say, I'm sure you've got something really maybe a little bit more riveting than sitting here with a headachy person, a headachy, feverish person. But I'm very grateful because I've been moving on these thoughts, on the waves of these thoughts in the wake of yesterday's conversation quite a bit. So if you need any clarification on anything, please let me know. Lots of love to you. I'm all ready for bed. So I actually I didn't have the energy to get dressed today either. So I'm sitting here in my housecoat and pajamas. I woke up like this. And I will go to bed like this with a grateful heart. And love you.